Hey guys, welcome back to the WatchGauge YouTube channel. In my last video, I was telling you guys how some people have been saying I should be doing some videos that weren't about selling watches, meaning almost every video on WatchGauge is me telling you about watches I either have just gotten in or have coming in that we're offering for sale. So people have been suggesting for a little while that maybe I do some videos just about watches, not particularly ones we're selling. So I posed that question to you guys in the last video. What do you want to hear about? And thank you guys. A handful of you have responded, gave me some good ideas of what you'd like to hear me banter about. But before I get into that, quick wrist check. I'm wearing the Draken Benguela. This watch is a beast. I scuba dive. I've told you guys that before. I like tool watches. So this is an oversized diver. It's not oversized in diameter, but it's a big, thick, meaty watch, and it's got some heft to it. And I opt for the one that's got the ETA movement, only because most of the brands I sell do not have ETA movement. So that's why I went with this one, but fantastic watch. So I did get a lot of emails, some comments in the YouTube video section about things that you guys might like to hear about. Easily the most common one was, in some form or fashion, how did I start WatchGauge, or how did I get into the watch business, or what got me into watches? And I think that's a very individual thing, right? Like probably every single one of you who are watching this are into watches, and almost every single one of you probably has a very unique journey into getting into watches. Mine's obviously a bit different because I'm in the watch industry. I've been in the watch industry since 1999, and I'll kind of tell you how I started and how I got into it. I graduated college in the late 1990s. My very first job ever was as a project manager for a technology company in Manhattan. The one thing I quickly realized was that all of the top brass in the company were all wearing a very nice wristwatch. So with my very first paycheck, I thought, why not join the crowd? And I went to I cashed my paycheck. I went to Tourneau, not far from my office in the city, and I bought a Tag Heuer 6000 series in quartz. At the time, I had no idea about mechanical movements, automatic movements, quartz movements. I had no clue. And I spent the majority of my first paycheck on a Tag Heuer watch, which, by the way, made me feel like a king. In my early 20s, rocking a very, very cool, and in my opinion at the time, a very expensive watch. And I have to be honest with you, it wasn't about the watch. It was about the prestige of wearing the watch for me. I didn't go out and look at other watches. I wasn't looking for my next watch, and I wasn't a watch enthusiast of any sort, but that's kind of what got me into watches. A few short years later, I was living in Manhattan, and I traveled out here to the east end of Long Island for a friend's barbecue. At this barbecue was a guy I had met that day who happened to be the owner of Chrono Swiss USA. He imported Chrono Swiss watches into the United States. So we met, he commented on my Tag Heuer, and we got to talking about watches. He was wearing a Chrono Swiss lunar chronograph, and I remember the very moment he took it off and handed it to me. And I was looking at it, appreciating it, and he told me to flip it over. And it had a sapphire crystal case back with a modified ETA 7750. I remember that moment so specifically because I was absolutely blown away. It was the first time I'd ever seen an automatic movement. And legitimately, I didn't want to give it back to him. I just sat and stared at it and moved it around and pressed the chronograph buttons, and I was watching that movement in action. So we all parted ways after that barbecue, and about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Stephen Butler, and he said, look, you know, we had a great conversation out at the barbecue. I happen to be looking for a sales manager, somebody to cover the Eastern Territory of the United States and visit jewelry stores and sell Chrono Swiss. And to keep the story short, about 6 months later, I started my first day with Chrono Swiss. Now, the ironic thing was they didn't have a West Coast sales manager, so technically I covered the entire country. But again, I was still a novice in watches. I didn't know about the different brands and the different movements and the history of all these companies. And back then, there was the internet, but it wasn't what it is today, obviously, so it was not easy to find the information I was looking for. So what I had done was I had contacted every brand I could, and I asked them to send me a catalog, because that's what they did back then. I contacted every watch industry publication and asked to be put on their comp list, so every month I would get their magazine. And I really just dove right into the deep end of learning about watches. Using those materials, I taught myself all about the different complications, the movements, the histories of the brands, what their collections entailed or what they offered. In addition to that, I was visiting 10 jewelry stores or watch stores a week, calling on them, either servicing them as an existing Chronoswiss account or trying to sell them Chronoswiss. So I got to see all of these watches firsthand. So not only was I there selling the brand I represent, but I was also asking to pick up a Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso or an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, and all these spectacular watches. It didn't take very long for me to almost become an expert because I just genuinely, truly loved it that much. So that is how I got into the watch industry. I'm going to do a video at some point. Another question somebody asked is how does one get into the watch industry? I'm going to do a video on that in the future, but let's get back on track. So I was the national sales director for Chronoswiss for a few years, and at that point I had met my wife. We started dating, we were getting serious, and I was traveling about 45 weeks a year, Monday through Friday. And I just kind of envisioned myself as a traveling husband, not being around much, and truly just wasn't the life I wanted for myself or for my family, or my future family, I should say. So I was visiting one of my accounts here on Long Island, Mataloni Jewelers, and I was talking with the owner, Lou, and I was saying to him, you know, I think I might end up finding a different career path as much as I love watches, because the truth of the matter is I just don't want to be away from home that much as a young married couple. And in that instance, Lou said, well, why don't you come work here and you can run my watch department? So about 2 months after that, I was actually the fine timepiece manager, I think the title was, for Mataloni Jewelers. Now at that time, it was super fun. We carried Audemars Piguet, Glashütte, Ulysse Nardin, Harry Winston, Chopard. I think we had somewhere in the ballpark of 23 watch brands. And I managed all of that watch department. And again, it was just almost like a dream come true. And I actually ended up staying there for about 14 years, which was quite a long time. I ended up becoming a heck of a watch collector over the course of the years. I had some fantastic watches. I had a Royal Oak, I had a few Ulysse Nardins, I had a Glashütte Original, Hublot, Chopard, and it was a lot of fun. And then something inside me at that point, over the course of the last few years I was there, I just really felt the entrepreneurial bug, the entrepreneurial spirit, and I really wanted to see if I could do something grander on a professional level with my life. So I ended up selling most of my watch collection. I started a technology startup specifically targeting the watch industry. With most of the watches I sold, that's kind of how I funded it. And it was a failure. It was a complete failure. I left my job that I had a decent paycheck coming in every week. I went out on my own and started this great business. It was a fantastic idea. It was just very, very difficult to execute. So during that time period, while I was starting this startup, I was buying and selling rare watches. I was buying them on forums, cleaning them up and selling them on eBay or other places. And I can't say who it was, but we ended up getting a client who was pretty famous, owns one of the biggest corporations in America, and he was buying watches from me fairly regularly along with my partner at the time. He was buying watches from us pretty regularly, and I pitched a custom watch idea to him. He loved the idea. We ended up making 20 watches for him for a specific event for his company. Again, I wish I could tell you all about this project, but he wanted it to be private and non-disclosure. So while that company was failing, I was starting a company that was doing custom watches for wealthy individuals and for corporations. I ended up doing a few projects with that business. Again, most of the guys, they wanted to be confidential, but that was fantastic. And while I was out in Michigan visiting that client to deliver 20 custom-made watches to him, I had dinner with a very good friend of mine and his brother who are in Michigan. They own a watch store called Darakshan Jewelers, and we had dinner. We were catching up, we were talking the watch industry, and Ara Darakshan asked me, John, what do you think a shining spot in the watch industry is? Where do you think there's future potential business that's not really tapped yet? And automatically I said micro brands. Now at that point I bought myself a handful of micro brands. Micro brands were fairly new to the scene in 2016, I believe this was, and he had never even heard of micro brands. So I explained what they were, and I said, look, you have all these small independently owned companies where the person running them is usually solo. They're designing watches, they're having them manufactured, they're marketing, they're selling, they're fulfilling them. They're doing all these things, and each brand is doing all of it at once. So I said to him, I feel like it would be great to start an online store that specifically focuses on micro brands. Now, this truly wasn't a conversation that I had had with myself in my head just yet, but that conversation with Ara made that light bulb go off, and I said, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. And WatchGauge was born. So WatchGauge I launched on September 1st of 2017, and here we are 4+ years later, and I truly owe it to all of you guys. Those of you who buy watches from WatchGauge, those of you who watch the videos, follow on Instagram and Facebook and everything like that, particularly sharing out any of the social media that I put out there, because if it wasn't for you guys, I'd be working for somebody else right now. So anyway, that's my watch journey. That's my journey through the watch business. I hope that answered a handful of your questions. Truly, let me know what you think of this video. If you'd like to see me do other non-watch selling related videos for the WatchGauge channel, I know that some people had asked about my personal collection over the course of time, and as well as how did I get into watch collecting particularly. I kind of addressed that today, but I could do a more specific video on that. I can also do videos on types of movements, types of complications, types of hands, types of bezels. You know, I can do any array of video that you guys wish, if you wish to see them. So if so, drop me a line in the comment box or shoot me an email at john@watchgauge.com. Another thought too, not sure if you guys are into it, but if you want to have a Zoom call with me and discuss your watch journey, I think that would be kind of a fun video series as well. So let me know what you think, drop some comments, like the video, subscribe, and as always guys, I truly appreciate you watching the videos, you buy watches and everything else that you do. It means the world to me. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll look forward to dropping another video very, very soon.